Imagine yourself wandering through the streets of ancient Rome in the year 67 AD. Suddenly, you witness something that sends a chill down your spine. The Emperor Nathan is walking through the Forum, accompanied by a young woman who appears to be his new wife. She is adorned with luxurious silk and jewels, catching everyone's attention. Yet, whispers follow behind them, because everyone is aware of a terrifying secret. The woman by the side of the most powerful man alive used to be a boy called Spencer. What Nathan did to Spencer stands as one of the most disturbing examples of psychological and physical torment in recorded history. Before we delve into these overlooked stories, filled with endurance and pain, if you enjoy uncovering hidden historical truths, consider pressing that like button and subscribing for more intriguing content. Also, please drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. It amazes me that we're collectively exploring these ancient tales from various corners of the world, united by our shared fascination with the past. What I'm about to share is not merely another story of Roman extravagance. This narrative reveals how unchecked power can twist love into obsession, turn sorrow into madness, and transform a person into a living doll, shaped to satisfy one man's warped desires. You might not be familiar with Spencer's name, but his story will linger in your mind long after you finish this video. Let us begin with the man responsible for constructing this tragic saga. Nathan was not born wicked. In fact, his early rule showed great potential when he came to power at only 16 years old. Many citizens thought they were witnessing the beginning of a bright new era. He cut taxes, sponsored public amusements, and even took the part in theatrical performances that delighted ordinary people. However, absolute authority tends to corrupt even the most hopeful minds, and by the year 65 AD, something had deeply fractured within the emperor's psyche. Perhaps it was the relentless suspicion born from knowing everyone around him desired his throne. Maybe it was the loneliness of being the sole ruler over an empire of 60 million who could never be opposed, questioned, or proven wrong. Or maybe it was due to what happened to the one individual he claimed to love more than his own life. Her name was Piper Simmons, and she embodied everything Nathan believed he wanted in a partner. Breathtakingly beautiful, sharp enough to match his grand self-image, and ambitious enough to share his visions of everlasting fame. Yet, Poppy was more than just an attractive face at court. She had keen political insight that made her both a powerful supporter and a dangerous rival. When Nathan first noticed Piper, he was already wed to Olivia, the daughter of the former emperor. That union had been cold and devoid of love. Piper represented all the qualities that Olivia lacked, where Olivia was reserved. Poppy was lively and commanding, while Olivia preferred to stay out of the spotlight. Poppy thrived on being the focus of everyone's attention. The affair between Nathan and Poppy started as a usual Roman scandal, but what began as simple infidelity quickly turned into something far more dangerous, an intense obsession. Nathan was not only drawn to Poppy's beauty, he was utterly consumed by her in a way that frightened even his closest advisors. Ancient historians portray Nathan's behavior during this time as increasingly unstable and possessive. He would explode with violent anger if any man dared to glance at Poppy too long. During official events, Nathan went as far as placing guards around her constantly, supposedly for protection, but truly to keep track of every single interaction. He showered her with extravagant gifts that drained the imperial treasury, jewels from distant India, silks from faraway China, and perfumes brought from Arabia. Yet the most revealing act of his obsession was how he began to alter reality itself just to suit his desire. First, he divorced Olivia's, a shocking decision that alienated many of his supporters. Then, Nathan announced his plan to wed Poppy in a grand imperial ceremony. The wedding became a lavish display of wealth never seen before, with Nathan sparing no cost to show his dedication. Even marriage failed to fulfill Nathan's hunger to claim Poppy completely. He started cutting her off from family and friends, surrounding her only with those whose positions depended entirely on his favor. He ordered several portrayals and statues of her were created not only for public exhibition, but also for Nathan's private chambers, so he could gaze upon her likeness even when they were separated. Ancient accounts reveal that Nathan would at times spend several hours simply observing Poppy as she carried out her everyday routines. This was not an expression of romantic affection, but rather the actions of someone who had mistaken love for possession, perceiving another individual not as a separate person, but as a beautiful object meant exclusively for his enjoyment. Poppy, on her side, appeared to grasp the perilous nature of the situation she was involved in. She was clever enough to recognize that her attractiveness, combined with Nathan's fixation, granted her remarkable influence. Yet she was also perceptive enough to understand that such power came with serious dangers. She started leveraging her sway to promote her family's goals, creating a network of allies who would stand by her in case Nathan's feelings shifted. However, Piper had a critical weakness, as she was unafraid to confront Nathan. In contrast to everyone else in the imperial court who learned to predict the emperor's temperaments, Piper maintained her independence of mind. She would debate him about governmental issues, critique his artistic endeavors, and even ridicule his performances when she deemed them lacking. The exact details of the tragic events of that decisive day in 65 A.D. differ according to which ancient chronicler you trust, but the result was always identical. What began as a common domestic disagreement escalated into a fatal conclusion. Some accounts mention Nathan returning home late from chariot competitions, while others highlight his involvement in theatrical performances. The emperor lost control in a manner that would torment him eternally. According to Tacitus, the confrontation intensified when Poppy dared to challenge Nathan's focus, implying that he valued his public reputation more than his duties as a spouse and parent. Poppy was with child at that moment, carrying what would have been their second offspring, and perhaps the anxiety made her less tolerant of Nathan's increasingly unpredictable conduct. What followed has sparked debate among scholars for ages, yet the general agreement is that Nathan, in a burst of fury, either kicked or struck his expectant wife with such overwhelming violence that she sustained deadly internal damage. Some narrations mention a single hard blow to her belly, while others portray a relentless assault leaving her bleeding and unconscious on the cold marble surface. Picture the instant Nathan grasped the gravity of his actions. A man who commanded 30 legions, who could summon death with a mere command, and who was revered as a deity in the eastern regions, had just extinguished the one person he truly cherished. The woman he had become obsessed with was fading away because of his own uncontrollable rage. Ancient writings depict the aftermath, as one of the most heart-wrenching episodes in imperial chronicles. Nathan is said to have thrown himself upon Poppy's lifeless form, alternating between pleading for her pardon and demanding her to survive as though his imperial power could will her to live. His grief stretched beyond even the boundaries of death. He summoned the finest doctors in Rome, offering them great fortunes to save her life and threatening them with punishment if they failed. However, it was too late. Poppy passed away within hours, taking with her the unborn child who could have been Nathan's successor. At that moment, something deeply fundamental shattered in the Emperor's mind. The sorrow that followed was more than just emotional pain. It was a total detachment from reality. Nathan's mourning became notorious. He refused to allow preparations for burial, as was customary according to Roman traditions. Instead, he had her body embalmed and placed in a tomb that was far more extravagant than those of earlier emperors. He declared her divine, founded a shrine in her memory, and spent endless hours speaking to her corpse, as if she could still respond. The imperial court had to navigate an even more dangerous political climate. Courtiers were compelled to take part in the illusion that Piper was somehow still alive, constantly referring to her in the present tense and leaving her preferred chair unoccupied at feasts. Anyone who dared to suggest that the emperor should move forward with his life was immediately exiled or punished severely. It was during this intense period that Spencer first caught Nathan's attention, although the young man had no idea that he was stepping into a nightmare. Spencer was likely around 14 or 15 years old, born into slavery within the imperial household, but freed during childhood. He was raised inside the palace, educated to fulfill administrative responsibilities. This upbringing placed him in a unique position within the court's intrigues. The status of a freedman in imperial service was, in fact, relative and privileged. These individuals often enjoyed conditions that surpassed those of free-born citizens belonging to lower social orders. However, such privilege came at the cost of total reliance on the emperor's favor. Freedmen depended entirely on the generosity of their former masters, which left them extremely vulnerable. They could rise to positions of considerable power, but could also be dismissed, punished, or even killed arbitrarily without any legal protection. What made Spencer stand out in Nathan's eyes was not his intellect or abilities, but his appearance. Numerous ancient records concur that this young man bore an astonishing resemblance to the deceased Piper Simmons, particularly in his eyes and the delicate contours of his facial structure. In Roman culture, physical similarity was believed to reveal a profound spiritual link, so this likeness appeared nearly supernatural. When Nathan first saw Spencer following Poppy's passing, something in the emperor's fractured mind shifted. This was an opportunity to reverse the irreversible, to restore what had been lost. The resemblance was so vivid that Nathan might have truly believed he was witnessing the return of Piper Simmons' spirit in a different body. Naturally, there was one clear challenge. Spencer was male. Yet, for a man who had convinced himself of his divinity and had spent many months conversing with a corpse, altering someone's gender seemed a minor hurdle. What followed was one of the darkest examples of cold, calculated cruelty in history. Nathan did not merely choose to impose his will on Spencer. Choosing to live permanently as a woman, the emperor commanded the finest doctors in Rome to carry out surgery on the young man solely to enhance his feminine appearance. This act went beyond mere mutilation. It represented a deliberate erasure of Spencer's identity as a human being. The operation was perilous, painful, and irreversible, often claiming lives due to infection or hemorrhage. Even if Spencer survived, he would undergo profound changes in body, mind, and society. Fatherhood would be out of reach, genuine romantic connections impossible, and Roman society would never fully accept him as male. The surgery occurred within the imperial palace, in rooms specially arranged for this purpose. Ancient medical techniques were rudimentary, using simple tools and harsh anesthetics. The ordeal lasted several hours and brought a serious chance of death. Guards restrained Spencer while the doctors proceeded, with his cries unheard or ignored. Recovery spanned weeks or even months. Afterward, Nathan declared something that stunned even the most cynical Roman nobles. He intended to marry Spencer in a grand imperial ceremony. Months of preparation consumed vast resources. Spencer received a new name, Piper Simmons, in honor of the deceased empress, and was moved to private apartments to ready himself for the new role, with imperial dressmakers attending to his wardrobe and appearance. An entire wardrobe was created for Spencer, filled with gowns designed to enhance his altered figure and conceal any remaining masculine traits. Skilled jewelers crafted accessories exclusively for him, many featuring jewels that once belonged to Piper Simmons herself. These items were more than mere decorations. They served as physical reminders of the departed woman and the identity Spencer was forced to assume. Makeup artists trained him in cosmetic methods to feminize his features, demonstrating how to use dark pigments to make his eyes appear bigger, how to apply blush for a healthy glow, and how powders could soften the angles of his face. These sessions were not merely about looks, but part of a deliberate effort to erase his original identity gradually. Hairdressers taught Spencer intricate styling techniques popular among noble Roman women of the time. His hair was cut, curled, and styled into elaborate arrangements, often including luxurious accessories. This process required several hours each day, involving numerous attendants and heated tools. Perhaps the most mentally taxing part was mastering feminine behavior and deportment. Tutors instructed him in how to walk, sit, and gesture with ladylike grace. He learned the correct ways to position his hands, place his feet, arrange his clothes while seated, and move gracefully through space, emphasizing elegance over masculine strength. Voice coaches also worked closely with him, helping him alter his speech to higher, more feminine tones. Adopting speech patterns linked to feminine communication proved to be the most difficult challenge, as vocal habits are deeply rooted and hard to alter consciously. Can you imagine the mental anguish of this transformation? Each day, Spencer was compelled to gaze into mirrors that reflected a stranger bearing his face. Every lesson in feminine conduct reminded him that his true self was being methodically erased. Every piece of jewelry that had once belonged to a deceased woman now felt like a chain tying him to a role he never desired. The wedding was set for the spring of 67 A.D. to align with religious festivals that would enhance its ceremonial significance. Nathan spared no cost, treating it as a genuine imperial marriage, deserving of the greatest emperor in Roman history. The event took place in the grandest palace hall, adorned with exotic flowers and lit by thousands of oil lamps. Musicians performed customary wedding melodies, while servants presented the finest wines and delicacies. To outside spectators unaware of the full truth, It might have appeared as a typical imperial wedding. However, those in the know realized they were witnessing something unprecedented and unsettling. Here stood the most powerful man on earth, publicly marrying a teenage boy surgically altered to resemble his deceased wife. The ceremony incorporated all traditional Roman customs, exchanging vows, joining hands, sharing sacred bread, and signing official documents, making this occasion both a political statement and a profound personal ordeal. The union official and the guests played their roles with impressive acting talents, offering congratulations and lavish gifts while displaying appropriate joy. Yet the atmosphere must have been heavy, filled with barely hidden horror, fascination, and the tense energy that comes from being part of something deeply wrong. After the wedding, Nathan treated Spencer exactly as he would a rightful empress. The young man was given his own household staff, private quarters within the palace grounds, and funds from the imperial treasury. He had his own litter for travel, horses for riding, and a retinue of attendants. However, all this obvious luxury came at a dreadful cost: the complete erasure of his original identity and a continuous performance of a psychologically crushing role. Spencer was expected to accompany Nathan to public events, sit beside him at official dinners, and act as the devoted wife in all interactions. This was not merely for show. Nathan seemed to truly believe he had brought Poppy back to life. He would call Spencer by his deceased wife's name, recall shared memories that never actually took place, and demand responses that upheld the extensive fiction. Every day became a high-risk performance in which even the smallest error could mean death. Spencer had to remember not only how to look and behave like a woman, but also how to react as if he were Poppy herself. When Nathan mentioned events from his past marriage, Spencer had to respond as though he genuinely was. The ancient sources recall Spencer personally and describe how he became increasingly adept at this charade, developing an almost otherworldly ability to sense Nathan's moods and react with precision. Yet they also mention that Nathan grew more isolated and somber as time went on. Despite this, he maintained his public facade flawlessly. The mental toll is difficult to fathom. Each morning, Spencer awoke in chambers adorned to evoke a deceased woman he never knew. His reflection in every mirror bore no likeness to his true self. Every interaction demanded he impersonate another, with memories and experiences that belonged to someone else. For over 2 years, Spencer endured this surreal life. His suffering escalated when Nathan chose to journey to Greece. The emperor fancied himself an artist and was eager to compete in Greek festivals, confident his abilities would gain recognition there. Naturally, Spencer accompanied him, presented before foreign dignitaries as the Empress of Rome. Picture Greek nobles struggling to comprehend their conqueror traveling with a youth dressed as a woman, insisting that everyone accept this blatant illusion as truth. By the year 68 A.D., Nathan's extravagances had finally outraged the Roman elite. Uprisings erupted throughout the empire, led by governors wearied of the emperor's unpredictable conduct and disregard for leadership. The Praetorian Guard declared their resistance to Nathan's rule. The reign continued, while the Senate denounced him as a foe of the state, when Nathan finally escaped Rome, accompanied by a small band of supporters. Among them was Spencer. Even when facing death, the emperor could not abandon his living reminder of Piper Simmons. They took refuge in a villa outside Rome, awaiting either rescue or capture. Nathan shifted between grand escape schemes and dramatic preparations for ending his own life. When news arrived that his enemies were drawing near, Nathan ultimately chose death instead of capture. However, his suicide left Spencer extremely exposed. As one of the most prominent symbols of Nathan's rule, he became both a valuable trophy and a dangerous risk for whoever seized power next. What followed was possibly even more heartbreaking. Spencer was turned into a political object, passed around from one influential man to another like precious property. First taken by Nidius Sabinus, then and later Vitellius, each treated him similarly to Nathan, dressing him as a woman and calling him by Poppy's name. It was under Vitellius that Spencer's nightmare reached its darkest point. The new emperor decided to exploit him for public spectacle in the Colosseum, staging reenactments of mythological scenes filled with violence and humiliation. For Spencer, this was the ultimate degradation, being sexually humiliated before thousands for their entertainment. Rather than endure this final disgrace, Spencer made the one choice that had truly belonged to him in years. He took his own life. Spencer likely died from poison sometime in the year 69 A.D., probably no older than 20 years. At his death, he finally escaped the disturbing drama that had engulfed his life. His story turned into a warning about the perils of unchecked power and the severe human toll of imperial extravagance. However, ancient historians appeared more focused on Spencer as a symbol of imperial excess rather than as a person. What makes his tale so unsettling is not only the suffering he endured, but also how he was systematically deprived of identity and control from the moment Nathan decided he resembled Piper Simmons. From that point, Spencer stopped existing as an individual and instead became a canvas for the emperor's twisted desires. The fact that Spencer chose death rather than face further humiliation indicates that beneath the forced femininity and imperial manipulation, some part of his original self endured. His suicide was both heartbreaking and a final gesture of rebellion, a refusal to be dehumanized any longer, even at the ultimate cost. Perhaps most poignantly, we know almost nothing about who Spencer was before all this transformation. What dreams did he hold? What goals did he have? All of that was erased when he turned into Nathan's living doll, replaced by a role so complete that his initial identity was lost forever. The boy compelled to become an empress, who faced years of mental and physical torment, and who ultimately chose death over continued disgrace, deserves to have his story remembered, to be remembered not merely as a peculiar figure from ancient Rome, but as a symbol of both human cruelty and resilience. Spencer chose his own death, reclaiming the freedom that had been denied to him throughout his adult life. He took back the ability to determine his own destiny. His story reminds us that behind every tale of imperial magnificence lie personal accounts of pain and endurance that deserve our empathy and reflection, even after the immense span of 2,000 years.